He stood up during dessert, lifted his wine glass, and said he was moving into my house, like it was some kind of toast. I remember the way Mom laughed. She thought it was a joke, that dry, deadpan humor my brother always used to soften hard news. But I knew him better. I saw the way his eyes flicked toward me, daring me to react. And for a second, I didn't. I just sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, strawberry shortcake slowly soaking into the whipped cream. He was serious. "I'm moving in next week," he repeated, this time louder, with that fake grin that only widened when he was doing something manipulative. Needed to shake things up, you know? And who better to crash with than my baby sister? My baby sister. The table fell quiet except for the ticking of Dad's old wall clock, the one our grandfather had carved decades ago, back when this house still felt like a family home. Now, it felt like a trap. If you're enjoying this so far, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. By the way, I'm Lila Brennan, 34, freelance UX designer, introvert, and as of last Thanksgiving, unofficial hostage negotiator. This little story? It started on a rainy November night in Portland, around a table set for 6, with tension baked into every bite. And trust me, my brother had no idea what I'd planned. The silence after his announcement stretched just a beat too long, long enough for Mom to clear her throat, for Dad to glance nervously between us, and for my wine to start tasting like vinegar. I smiled. Not a warm smile. More like the tight, lip-only kind you give a stranger who cuts in front of you at the grocery store. "Oh?" I said, stabbing a chunk of cake with unnecessary force. "Since when?" "Since I broke the lease on my apartment," he said casually, like he hadn't just detonated a grenade and handed me the pin. "Didn't see the point in paying rent when I've got family with space." Technically, I did have space. A second bedroom that I'd converted into a cozy reading nook/guest room, but the idea of him occupying it full-time? Of my life being disrupted by his chaos again? He looked directly at me, gauging. "Unless there's a reason you'd rather I didn't," and there it was. The trap. Say yes, and he wins. Say no, and I look heartless in front of our aging parents, who already think I don't do enough to stay close to family. I shrugged, still smiling. "Of course not. Mi casa es su casa." He beamed. "Knew you'd be cool with it." I excused myself from the table 2 minutes later and locked myself in the upstairs bathroom. Not to cry, I was past that phase. No, I just needed a second. A second to breathe, and to remember the backup plan I'd kept in my back pocket for exactly this moment. Because I knew this day was coming. And he had no idea I was ready. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't the caffeine, I'd cut myself off at 1 cup by noon. It wasn't even the storm battering against my windows, though the wind did scream like a banshee through the gutters. No, what kept me awake was the memory of my brother's smug face. The kind of face only someone with nothing to lose could wear. It had been 8 years since we'd lived under the same roof. 8 years since I'd gotten out from under his shadow, or more accurately, his mess. And in that time I'd built a quiet life for myself. Clean, organized, peaceful. The kind of life that doesn't leave dishes in the sink or mysterious charges on your credit card. And he wanted to bulldoze right through it. I lay in bed, watching headlights smear across my ceiling from passing cars. The city never truly slept, and neither did I, not when my brain was running recon on the war that was about to start inside my own home. Because let me be clear, Daniel Brennan was not just a difficult sibling. He wasn't one of those brothers who forgets birthdays or borrows tools without returning them. No. Daniel was a walking Category 5 hurricane, the kind of person who could talk his way out of any mess he created, and talk you into one, too. Back in college, he borrowed my laptop for a weekend. When I got it back, it was completely wiped, every design portfolio I'd spent 3 years building, gone. He claimed it was a virus and gave me a used MacBook with a cracked screen as an apology. Like that made us even. Another time, he opened a credit card in my name to build my score. You'd think I would have noticed sooner, but he had it forwarded to a P.O. box and made minimum payments, until he didn't. By the time I found out, I had a collection agency breathing down my neck for a jet ski rental in Arizona. I've never even been to Arizona. So, no, this wasn't just about personal space. This was about survival. Emotional, financial, mental survival. At 3:14 a.m., I sat up and opened my laptop. The backup plan I'd been refining for over a year? It was time to put it into motion. And like every good plan, it started with surveillance. The first thing I did was reopen the encrypted file I'd named innocently, Spring Budget 22. Inside it lived an entire dossier I'd been compiling on Daniel since the last time he borrowed money and vanished for 3 months. Some people journal. Some paint. I collect receipts. I'm talking text threads, screenshots, photos of parking tickets in my name, a voice memo from my former landlord detailing the incident with the grill, don't ask, and a detailed Excel sheet titled Chronology of Daniel's Shenanigans. I had dates, times, dollar amounts. I even had a column for emotional damage rated on a 1 to 10 scale. He thought I was a pushover. But push long enough, and even a pillow turns into a brick wall. I started by checking his social media. Daniel didn't believe in privacy, which worked in my favor. His Instagram was public, and true to form, it painted a picture so sanitized it practically sparkled. There he was at a rooftop bar last week, sipping cocktails with 2 women half his age. There he was at a beach I didn't recognize, holding a surfboard I was 95% sure he couldn't actually use. And in his story highlights? A minimalist living quote over a photo of an Airbnb he definitely couldn't afford. Curious, I reverse image searched the beach photo. Just as I suspected, stock image. Daniel had never stepped foot on that beach. Next, I checked LinkedIn. His profile said freelance marketing consultant, which was rich considering the last time he tried to help me market my portfolio, he ended up accidentally posting a meme about lizard people on my homepage. His listed clients were vague, wellness startup, e-commerce brand, celebrity influencer, and all unverifiable. Then I did what any rational person would do at 3:42 in the morning, I opened Venmo. His profile was public. Jackpot. There it was, payment after payment labeled utilities, Uber to pick up your drunk ass, couch cleaning again, and the ominous for the bail fund woozy face dot. His most frequent payees were 3 people I didn't recognize. I clicked into one, some guy named Gob. His feed was a running tally of transactions involving poker nights, late-night IHOP runs, and something called The Incident with no further context. I leaned back, staring at the glow of the screen. Daniel wasn't just irresponsible. He was actively digging a hole, and now that hole was getting too deep to hide. And suddenly, my suspicions weren't just hunches, they were alarms screaming in my gut. This wasn't just about freeloading. This was about whatever, or whoever, was chasing him. The day Daniel moved in, he showed up 3 hours late and 20 decibels too loud. My doorbell rang at exactly 2:43 p.m., I remember because I had just reheated leftover lentil soup and was trying to enjoy my last moment of peace before the invasion began. When I opened the door, there he was, aviators on, hair tousled in that curated messy but sexy way, arms full of mismatched duffel bags. Behind him stood a man I didn't recognize, wearing a hoodie with the sleeves cut off and carrying an aquarium. An aquarium. Lila. Daniel grinned, as if we were long-lost siblings from a feel-good movie reunion. Hope you don't mind, this is Wade. He's just helping me unload. He won't stay long. Wade didn't speak. Just gave me a slow nod and shuffled inside, the fish tank sloshing dangerously in his arms. Inside it floated a single neon tetra and a plastic skull with algae on it. You brought a pet? I asked. It's not a pet. It's more of a vibe. Daniel winked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I watched as they dumped bag after bag onto my clean hardwood floors. One of them split open, revealing socks, half a phone charger, and what looked disturbingly like a loose toothbrush with no case. My eye twitched. "You said you only had a suitcase." He shrugged. "I travel light, for me." Wade left 10 minutes later without a word. Daniel offered him a fist bump and a burrito coupon, which Wade accepted solemnly before disappearing into a beat-up Prius that belched smoke like a chimney. Once the door shut behind him, I turned to Daniel. "Ground rules," I said. He flopped dramatically onto my couch, stretching his arms like he owned the place. "Sure. Lay 'em on me, roomie." I inhaled. "No parties. No guests without asking. You clean up after yourself. Rent is due on the 1st. Don't touch my home office, my espresso machine, or my bath salts." Whoa, whoa. The bath salts? I gave him a look. He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, fine. Geez. You always were the fun one." He said it like a joke, but there was an edge to it, that old passive-aggressive tone that used to burrow under my skin like a splinter. "And no lying," I added. "That one hung in the air longer." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" I crossed my arms. "I mean, no secrets. If you're in trouble, or hiding something, I need to know now. I don't want surprises, Daniel." He blinked, then laughed, too loudly. "Relax, Lila. I'm just crashing for a bit, not hiding from the mob." He smiled. But his eyes didn't. By nightfall, I'd convinced myself it might not be so bad. Sure, he was messy. And loud. And took the longest shower I've ever timed in human history, 41 minutes, if you're wondering. But by 10 p.m., the house was quiet. Daniel was in the guest room. Door closed, lights off, and I was curled up on the couch with a fleece blanket, rewatching an old documentary on forensic linguistics. My comfort show. I even let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. Maybe living with me would give him structure. Maybe seeing how I operated, how peaceful a home could be when it wasn't filled with chaos, would rub off on him. I'd seen it happen to others. Friends who reformed messy partners. Co-workers who turned wild siblings into responsible roommates. Maybe Daniel just needed someone to believe in him again. And he was my brother. I remembered how, when I was 10 and terrified of thunderstorms, he'd pretend to be a storm whisperer, claiming he could command the lightning to go elsewhere if I gave him my Oreos. I gave up entire sleeves of cookies just to feel safe under his imaginary protection. That part of him, the sweet, reckless dreamer, hadn't always been a menace. Once, he'd been my hero. So I tried to reset. The next morning, I made coffee for two. Real coffee, Chemex, hand-poured, medium-roast Ethiopian beans, because if I was going to tolerate houseguests, they were damn well going to taste excellence. I even pulled out 2 mugs instead of my usual one. When Daniel emerged, bleary-eyed and shirtless, he blinked at the kitchen like he wasn't sure where he was. "Coffee?" I offered. He squinted. "Are you, smiling? Who are you and what have you done with my sister?" I rolled my eyes but poured him a cup. He took a sip, and his face changed. "Holy crap. This is amazing. Is this that nerdy pour-over thing you used to post about on Facebook? It's called a Chemex. And yes. You're welcome." He actually looked impressed. Then he sat down, rubbed his face, and let out a long breath. "Thanks, Lila. Seriously. For letting me stay. I know I've been a lot over the years." I tilted my head, wary but intrigued. "That's one way to put it." He chuckled. "I mean it. I know I haven't exactly been reliable. But I'm trying to change, okay? This is step 1. And maybe it was the coffee, or maybe it was that tired glimmer in his eye that reminded me of the kid who used to collect bugs in a mayonnaise jar just to show me the cool ones, But I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt around him in years. Hope. A small, cautious hope. Maybe he really was trying. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe. That hope lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning, I walked into the kitchen and nearly slipped on what I hoped was a spilled smoothie but suspected was something far more sinister. The blender was still plugged in, smeared with a red substance that smelled faintly of strawberries and regret. There was a sticky trail leading from the counter to the fridge, where a post-it note clung to the handle, scrawled in Daniel's handwriting, "Do not touch the OAT milk." Daniel's bulking flexed biceps. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds. Then I opened the fridge. The oat milk was gone. So were 3 eggs, half a block of cheese, and the last piece of lemon cake I'd hidden behind a bag of frozen peas. That cake had been my Friday night reward. A ritual. I closed the fridge, counted to 5, and opened the group chat I had with my best friend Clara. Me, he ate the cake. The cake. Clara, already? Girl. It's been 4 days. Me, I know. I'm going to kill him. Or fake my own death and move to Denmark. Clara, if you need bail money or help burying a body, just send a spoon emoji. I sent the spoon emoji. I decided to confront him calmly, because therapy works and I am not the same person I was during the Great Hairbrush War of 2013. When he stumbled into the living room around noon, wearing the same sweatpants from yesterday and a t-shirt that read "Woke up sexy again," I kept my voice even. "Hey," I said, crossing my arms. "Can we talk about kitchen boundaries?" He flopped onto the couch like it was his throne. "Sure. What's up?" "You've been using a lot of my groceries." He gave me a look that said, "This is what you called a meeting for?" "It's just oat milk and some eggs. It's also my lemon cake. And the hummus. And my sesame oil. Do you know how long it takes to find good sesame oil?" He rolled his eyes. "Okay, food cop. Chill. I'll go grocery shopping later. Can you also clean up after you cook? And rinse out the blender? And maybe not use every pan I own just to make an omelet?" He shrugged. "Sure. But you know, if we're going to be living together for a while, maybe we could ease up on the rules? It's starting to feel a little tight in here." "Tight?" I repeated, blinking. "You're just, intense." Intense. The word hit me like a slap. It echoed in my ears, conjuring every moment in my life someone had used that word to put me back in my box. I swallowed it down. "Daniel, I like my home clean. I like my food untouched. And I like my life predictable. If that's too intense for you, I get it. But you asked to live here. So either respect my space, or don't." He stared at me. Then stood up and walked into the guest room, shutting the door with just enough force to rattle the frames on the wall. The blender was still dirty. And the cake was still gone. That night, I stayed up late cleaning. Not because the apartment needed it. Though it always did, after Daniel's daily whirlwinds, but because I needed to feel in control of something. Anything. Wiping down counters, organizing spice jars alphabetically, even vacuuming the already vacuumed rug helped me push down the tight, anxious weight that had settled behind my ribs. Every time I let myself believe we'd turned a corner, Daniel managed to yank the wheel and drive straight into a ditch. But what rattled me more than his behavior was how familiar it all felt. This wasn't new. This was old, worn in dysfunction. The kind that doesn't start with big betrayals but little cuts, death by 1,000 paper-thin disappointments. Like the time in high school when I made it into the citywide art show, and he forgot to show up because he was playing poker in someone's garage. Or when I got my first client as a freelancer, and he celebrated by crashing on my couch for 2 weeks, eating all my meals and tanking my Wi-Fi. The pattern had always been the same. I build something. He wrecks it. Then he smiles like he's just being family. Around midnight, I finally gave in and opened the door to the guest room. He was lying in bed watching a show on his iPad, wireless headphones in, lights off except for the blue screen glow. His duffel bags were still half unpacked. One of them had spilled open, revealing receipts, empty snack wrappers, and a crumpled envelope with a red stamp I could just make out from the doorway, final notice. I didn't say anything about it. Instead, I asked, "Want tea?" He pulled one earbud out. "You made tea?" "I'm offering to." He blinked, like the kindness short-circuited his brain. "Sure." In the kitchen, I brewed chamomile, mine, from a stash I'd hidden behind the rice canister. When I handed him his mug, he took it carefully, like it might explode. "I know I'm not easy to live with," he said, after a moment. I leaned against the counter. "You think?" He grinned, just barely. "I mean it. I do want to change. I'm trying." The way he said it, quiet, almost embarrassed, twisted something in my chest. "I want to believe you," I said. "But it's hard when nothing ever sticks." He nodded, eyes on his tea. "That's fair." Silence fell. Heavy. Honest. Then he said, almost too softly, "I'm in over my head, Lila." I looked at him sharply. "With what?" But he didn't answer. Just gave me that same damn smile, the one that always showed up when he was hiding something big. And just like that, the small hope I'd nursed over the past few days flickered, and dimmed. Because I'd seen that smile before. And every time, it meant a storm was coming. I woke up the next morning with a plan. If Daniel wasn't going to tell me what mess he was in, then I was going to find out myself. I'd spent years training as a UX researcher, which, in plain English, means I know how to dig. Interviews, digital footprints, behavioral patterns. If someone left a trail, I could follow it. And Daniel? He left trails like a toddler with a ketchup bottle. After he left the apartment around 11 a.m., no explanation, just a half-hearted back later, I pulled out my laptop and a small notepad labeled Project D. Because sometimes, you have to turn your own brother into a case study. Step 1, revisit the red stamped envelope. I hadn't touched it last night, out of respect, or guilt, or both. But this morning, I walked into the guest room with a dust cloth in one hand and a pair of latex gloves in the other. You laugh. But I've seen what Daniel considers clean, and I wasn't taking any chances. The envelope was addressed to Daniel at his old apartment. The return address was from a collections agency, no company name, just a P.O. box and a 1-800 number. I snapped a picture with my phone, then replaced it carefully, exactly as I'd found it. Step 2, background research. I plugged the return address into a few databases. It linked to a firm that handled debt recovery and asset repossession. The name didn't ring any bells, but the Google reviews were a mix of angry caps-locked rants and warnings that they don't mess around. Step 3, follow the money, or lack thereof. I checked Venmo again. A new payment had come in from someone labeled Skeeter with the description for Thursday. The comments were just 2 fire emojis and a baseball bat. What the hell was Thursday? Was Daniel in some kind of gambling ring? A fight club? Some back-alley crypto scheme? I didn't know. But I did know one thing, whatever he was tangled in, it wasn't casual. And I wasn't about to let it sneak into my life through the front door. I clicked open an old folder on my desktop titled Contingency Plans. Inside it was everything I'd started drafting the last time Daniel had come close to wrecking my life: backup budgets, alternate living arrangements, even a version of my portfolio with a new last name, just in case I ever needed to vanish from a shared family identity. Overkill? Maybe. But when you've spent your life picking up someone else's broken pieces, you learn to carry glue everywhere. This time, though, I wasn't going to be the fixer. I was going to be the firewall. That evening, Daniel came home acting jumpy. Not the usual high energy, forgot I was supposed to be here jumpy. No, this was nervous jumpy. His laugh was too loud, his hands fidgeted when he talked, and he kept checking his phone like it owed him an apology. I watched him from the kitchen as he paced between the couch and the fridge, back and forth like a caged animal. Every time his phone buzzed, he flinched. Once, he actually cursed under his breath, then looked at me and forced a smile so stiff I thought it might snap his face in half. Something was off. "Everything okay?" I asked. He startled, literally flinched like I'd caught him in a lie. "Yeah. Fine. Just, busy day." "Where were you?" "Out." He grabbed a soda from the fridge. "With some old friends." "Which friends?" He didn't answer immediately. "You wouldn't know them," he muttered. I narrowed my eyes. "Try me." He took a long sip of soda and avoided eye contact. "It's not important." That was it. I dropped the pretense. "Daniel, I need to know what's going on." He froze mid-sip. "What do you mean?" "I mean the envelope from the collections agency. The shady Venmo payments. The way you've been acting since you got here, like you're running from something." "What is it?" He turned slowly, setting the can down on the counter with exaggerated care. "You went through my stuff?" I saw an envelope. I didn't open it. But I connected the dots. "You're in debt, aren't you?" He didn't deny it. Just sighed, rubbed his face, and leaned against the counter like his whole body was tired. "Yeah," he finally said. "I'm in over 30 grand. Credit cards, unpaid loans, some personal stuff." 30,000? My voice cracked. "How?" "Things snowballed, okay? The pandemic hit, clients vanished, I tried to invest in this crypto thing, and, of course it was crypto." He glared. "I thought I could flip it fast. Pay everything off. But it tanked. Hard. Then I owed people. Real people." "What kind of people?" "The kind who don't send polite reminders." There it was. The truth I'd been circling for days. Daniel hadn't come here just to crash. He'd come here because he was hiding. Because someone, somewhere, was looking for him. And he thought my quiet little apartment would be a safe haven. But I didn't feel safe anymore. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I whispered. "Because you wouldn't have let me in." He was right. But now, he was already here, and so was the danger that followed him. After his confession, the air in the apartment thickened like fog. You know how sometimes, after a storm, the silence is almost louder than the thunder? That was us. Walking around each other like two cats in a room full of rocking chairs. Daniel didn't leave the apartment the next day. He barely moved from the couch, phone glued to his hand, jumping at every sound. I watched as he turned the ringer off, locked the screen, then unlocked it again 5 seconds later. The TV played, but he wasn't watching. He was somewhere else, in his head, in the past, maybe in fear. And I was left with a horrible realization clawing at the back of my mind: if someone dangerous came looking for him, they'd be looking for me too. It wasn't paranoia. It was logic. He had no other address now. No other family nearby. I was his anchor, whether I'd agreed to be or not. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. Daniel practically leapt off the couch. I'd never seen someone move that fast in flip-flops. He peeked through the peephole, then exhaled, relief laced with something darker. "It's just a delivery," he muttered, waving me off. But he didn't open the door. He waited. And waited. Until whoever it was walked away. Only then did he crack the door open an inch, snatch a package off the mat, and close it like the hallway was radioactive. I stood there, staring. "You're expecting someone else?" I asked. "No," he lied. That night, I double-locked the door. I didn't even know who I was protecting us from, maybe not even him. Maybe just the fallout. The chaos. The fire that always followed Daniel like a shadow. I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled up my old security contact, a guy named Victor who used to date my friend Clara. He ran a small cybersecurity firm downtown and owed me a favor from a freelance design project I did for them last year. Me: "Hey Vic. You still have access to private search tools?" Victor: "Who died?" Me: "Hopefully no one. But can you run a name for me?" Daniel Brennan. Oregon-based. I need to know if there's anything criminal attached to him. There was a pause. Victor: "You want arrest records, pending charges, or you want everything?" Me: "Everything. Because I was done playing the supportive sister. If my brother had brought a wolf into my house, I wasn't going to wait for it to bite. I was going to find its teeth first." Victor got back to me at 2:08 a.m. The message lit up my screen like a flare in the dark. Victor: "Nothing on Daniel in state or federal records. No arrests, no warrants. But he's being watched. I found his name on a flagged contact list from a guy under surveillance in Nevada. Mob-adjacent stuff. Not your average debt collector. You need to get him out of your house, Lila." I reread the message 5 times. Each word tightened the knot in my stomach until I felt like I couldn't breathe. Mob-adjacent. Flagged contact list. Not your average debt collector. I wasn't just playing landlord to a messy brother. I was housing a liability in the eyes of people who didn't knock before they kicked in doors. I stared at the wall, at the guest room door just down the hall, closed and silent. He was in there sleeping, or pretending to. Oblivious. Or worse, resigned. A memory hit me: Daniel at age 17, blood dripping from his nose after getting into a fight behind the gym. He'd been defending some freshman from a bully. He'd come home grinning, proud of the damage he'd done. "You should have seen the other guy," he'd said, wiping his lip. But even then, I knew, Daniel didn't think ahead. He just reacted. And now he'd reacted himself into something we couldn't afford to ignore. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started planning how to get him out. Not just out of my apartment, out of the blast radius. Because I couldn't call the cops. That would only escalate things. And I couldn't confront him, not yet. Not without a plan he couldn't blow up with charm or guilt. So I dug back into my files, reopened old contacts from a tech client who'd once helped relocate abuse survivors. Quietly, off the grid. They owed me a favor too. And this time I was calling it in. "I need a short-term exit route," I told them over an encrypted call. "One-way ticket. No questions asked. For my brother." They didn't ask why. They just said, "Where to?" And I said the first city I could think of that Daniel hadn't ruined yet: Boise. No one ever thinks to look in Boise. By sunrise, a one-way bus ticket was waiting in my inbox. All I had to do was convince him to take it. I didn't tell him right away. Instead, I started reclaiming my space, inch by inch. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. If I was going to survive the rest of this mess, I needed control over something. So I got up early, made my usual 2 cups of coffee, but only poured one. Mine. When he woke up around 10 and stumbled into the kitchen, I still crusted with sleep, he blinked at the coffee pot like it had betrayed him. "No second cup?" I didn't even look up from my laptop. "Fresh out." He stood there, confused, scratching his head. "You mad at me?" "No," I said, without warmth. "I'm focused. Focused on getting you out of here before you take us both down with you." He poured himself water and muttered something I didn't catch. I let him stew. All day, I took calls with clients at the kitchen table. I left the guest room door open while he was gone and cleaned it, not like a host would, but like a landlord prepping for a new tenant. I stripped the bed, boxed up his clutter, and moved the bags to the hallway closet. That evening, I cooked dinner. Just for me. When he came home, he sniffed the air. "Is that tikka masala?" he asked, dropping his backpack at the door. I nodded. Took a bite. Didn't offer. He stared. "Wow. Okay. You have leftovers from Tuesday. Help yourself." He stood there in silence for a moment, like he was waiting for me to crack, to go soft. To make room for his mess again. But I didn't. He retreated to the guest room. I heard him curse when he saw the bed was stripped. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful. This wasn't about punishing him. This was about protecting me. Because Daniel Brennan had been the main character of his own disasters for too long, and I'd been cast as the reluctant co-star every time. Not anymore. The next morning, I laid it all out. He walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, only to find a manila envelope waiting on the counter with his name scribbled in Sharpie. Inside, the bus ticket to Boise, a prepaid debit card with $250, a printed bus schedule, and a single post-it note that read, "One last favor, take the off-ramp before the bridge burns." He stood there, staring at it like it might explode. "What the hell is this?" he asked, voice tight. "A way out," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "You said you wanted to change. This is your chance." He laughed, humorless, disbelieving. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm giving you an exit strategy. Quiet. Clean. No cops. No questions. You think Boise's going to solve my life? I think Boise is far enough from whoever you owe money to that maybe you can start over without getting us both dragged down." He paced, one hand in his hair, the other holding the envelope like it might catch fire. "Jesus, Lila. You've been planning this? Since the moment you said I'm moving in during dessert like it was a joke." He stopped. Looked at me. Really looked at me. "You don't trust me." "No," I said, calm and cold. "I don't." He flinched, but not from anger. From honesty. "Then why even help me?" I stood up, finally facing him eye to eye. "Because I remember who you were before you made messes for a living. And I want that version of you to survive this." He swallowed. Hard. "I can't promise. I'm not asking you to promise anything. I'm giving you a choice." Silence. "Then, and if I don't take it?" I leaned forward, voice low. "Then the next knock on this door might not be a delivery guy. And I won't be answering it." For the first time, I saw it in his eyes, fear. Not of me. Of consequence. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of resolve. He didn't say another word. Just picked up the envelope and walked out of the room. He didn't leave right away. I half expected him to storm out that morning, dramatic exit, duffel bag swinging, fish tank sloshing under one arm. But instead, he disappeared into the guest room and stayed there for hours. No music, no movement. Just silence. And silence from Daniel was always suspicious. By evening, I started to wonder if I'd pushed too hard. If I'd miscalculated. If he'd gone into one of those tailspins he used to spiral into in college, locking himself in for days, ignoring the world, waiting for some invisible monster to go away. I stood outside his door at one point, hand raised to knock, and froze. Then lowered it. He had to decide for himself. That was the whole point. But just before midnight, the door creaked open. He emerged slowly, eyes red, hair messy, hands empty. He sat on the couch across from me, same spot where he'd made his surprise announcement during Thanksgiving dinner, and looked at me for a long time. No smile. No performance. Just truth. "I booked the trip," he said softly. "I leave in the morning." I exhaled. Felt something in my chest unclench. "I don't know what I'm doing," he added. "But I know what I don't want to keep doing." That was enough. That was more than I'd expected, honestly. He stood, walked back to the guest room, and reappeared with 2 bags. No fish tank. No fanfare. Just a tired man finally admitting he was tired of running. He paused at the door. "You sure you don't want to come with me?" I smiled, faint and sad. "You've got to do this one alone." He nodded. "Yeah. I figured." Then he hesitated, like he wanted to say something more, some final apology, maybe even a thank you. But instead, he just opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and disappeared into the night. No slammed door. No drama. Just a soft click. And silence. The right kind. The apartment felt different the second he was gone. It was quiet again, that rare, golden kind of quiet that wraps around you like a weighted blanket. But underneath it was something else, a nervous hum. A sense that I'd crossed a line, one I couldn't uncross. I sat alone on the couch, still clutching my coffee mug even though it had gone cold hours ago. Had I done the right thing? There's this weird guilt that comes with choosing your own peace over someone else's chaos, especially when the chaos shares your blood. But I knew if I didn't draw the line now, I never would. Still, the risks weren't over. Daniel might have left, but whatever mess he was entangled in, whoever was looking for him could still trace his steps. And if they did, they'd trace them here. So I activated phase 2 of my plan. I emailed my building manager and requested a lock change due to security concerns. I rechecked the apartment's Wi-Fi security settings and rerouted my home IP through a secure VPN. Then, just for good measure, I filed a formal letter revoking Daniel's residency, just in case I needed proof later. It sounds extreme. But when your brother casually mentions owing money to people who don't send polite reminders, you start thinking like a target. I even moved the couch 2 inches to the left. Not for security, just because I could. The whole apartment was mine again. Every square inch. Every corner. Every silence. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because part of me still wondered, had Daniel really walked away from all of it? Or was this just the quiet before the next storm? 3 days later, the knock came. Not a buzz. Not a polite tap. A knock, deliberate, hard, slow. The kind that makes you freeze mid-step, heart ricocheting against your ribs. I was folding laundry, standing barefoot in my living room, and everything in me went cold. It was 7:12 p.m. I hadn't ordered anything. No one was coming over. And I hadn't told anyone about Daniel leaving, not even Clara. My phone was across the room. Another knock. Louder this time. Same rhythm. I moved slowly, quietly, until I reached the peephole. A man stood there. Mid-40s, bald, stocky build, jacket too neat to be casual. He wasn't delivering food. He wasn't carrying packages. And he wasn't smiling. He just stood there. Waiting. I didn't breathe. He knocked again. Then, and this chilled me, he leaned close to the door, like he knew I was right behind it, and said, softly, "Tell Daniel we're not done." My breath hitched. He didn't wait for a response. Just turned and walked away, not rushed, not panicked. Like he'd delivered a message, and that was enough. I waited 5 full minutes before I moved. Then I locked the deadbolt. Slid the chain. Activated the backup camera I'd hidden in the hallway smoke detector 2 days ago. I rewound the feed and saved the footage to 3 separate drives. He didn't say his name. He didn't have to. That knock was his signature. And it confirmed everything I feared. Daniel had left the building, but not the danger. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but focus. Because that knock had clarified something, this wasn't just Daniel's story anymore. It was mine now. Mine to finish, mine to protect, mine to close for good. At 6:03 a.m., I made coffee, opened my laptop, and did what I do best, researched. I traced the man's image using facial recognition tools from Victor's network, cross-checked license plate footage from nearby street cams, and reverse-engineered 2 of Daniel's old burner accounts to follow the digital breadcrumbs. It wasn't legal. But it was necessary. The man's name was Don Marcino, a mid-level enforcer tied to an underground loan syndicate that operated out of Reno and spread as far as Tacoma. He wasn't the top of the food chain. But he was high enough to make people disappear. Daniel hadn't just borrowed money. He'd borrowed from people who treated debt like blood oaths. I sent Victor the footage and everything I'd found. He called me back 20 minutes later. "You're not on their radar, yet. But if they think you're shielding him, that could change. He's gone." I gave them no reason to think otherwise. Good. Let's keep it that way. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I erased Daniel's presence from my home. I deleted texts, wiped metadata, and even scrubbed his digital footprint off my Wi-Fi logs. I took down the one photo I had of us on the fridge, the one from 1999, both of us in Halloween costumes, smiling like idiots, and tucked it into a drawer I rarely opened. Then I picked up my phone and finally texted him. "Me, someone came by. Knocked. Left a message. You know who. Daniel, I figured they might. Are you okay?" "Me, I am. But you need to disappear for real now. No online posts. No new numbers. No Venmo. Daniel, got it. Thanks, Lila. Daniel, again you saved me. Again. Me, no, Daniel. This time, I saved myself." I turned my phone off. And just like that, the loop closed. Daniel was gone. And so was the storm. What remained was a silence I'd earned. It's strange, the first few days after reclaiming your life. There's no fanfare. No banner falling from the ceiling. No one comes to hand you a medal for surviving your own family. It's just quiet. And still. And honestly, that's the reward. I started waking up before my alarm again. I made my coffee the slow way, Chemex ritual intact, kitchen spotless. I opened windows and let the September air drift in without worrying about someone else's smoke or mess or fish tank drama. I lit candles just because I could, without wondering if they'd be knocked over by someone wrestling their backpack in the hall. Peace came back to me like a cat, hesitant at first, then curling up in my lap like it had never left. I began redoing the guest room. Not to erase him, but to reclaim it. I repainted the walls, tossed the old sheets, replaced the half-broken lamp with something soft and warm. I turned the closet into a reading nook again, the way it had been before all of this started. Each act was quiet but powerful. A declaration. This is my space. This is my life. And I get to protect it. I even took a walk one evening, something I hadn't done in weeks without looking over my shoulder, and noticed how the streetlights hit the wet pavement, how my reflection stretched behind me like a shadow that finally knew its place. It didn't lead. It followed. Just like my past should. Last night, I sat at my dining table with a glass of wine. Same table, same spot as that night when Daniel made his grand announcement, the toast that wasn't really a toast. I even used the same wine glasses. The irony made me smile. There was no one else at the table. Just me. And yet, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I looked around at my apartment, quiet, clean, mine, and thought about all the versions of myself that had once shrunk to make room for someone else's disaster. That girl was gone. I remembered the silence that fell after Daniel had declared he was moving in. How no one said anything, not even me. How I let him bulldoze his way in with charm and chaos, like he always did. And I remembered something else, something I hadn't admitted even to myself at the time. That night, I didn't just feel cornered. I felt invisible. Because for a moment, I thought, here we go again. I'll disappear, and he'll take up all the air in the room. But I didn't disappear. Not this time. I stared down a man who'd been slipping out of consequences his entire life, and I made him take the long way out. For once, he didn't leave a mess. He left with a plan. Maybe not a perfect one, but one that didn't involve dragging me down with him. And I think, deep down, he knew that was the most love I'd ever shown him. Protecting him from himself. Protecting myself from him. I raised my glass to the empty seat across from me, the one he'd occupied that night with his smug little smirk. And I whispered, just loud enough to satisfy the ache in my chest, "Thank you for saving my life, Daniel. Even if you didn't mean to." Then I took a sip. And finally, let it go. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, give this a like, and share where you're tuning in from in the comments. You never know where stories like ours might find a home.